Most people think the Social Security decision begins with math. It doesn't. It begins with a feeling, a quiet feeling that starts somewhere around age 62, when a door opens and what used to be abstract suddenly becomes painfully real. For decades, Social Security was a line item on a paycheck stub, a tax pulled out before you touched the money, a promise that sat somewhere in the distance while life demanded your attention somewhere else. Then one day, the distance disappears, the door opens, and now you are no longer talking about some future benefit. Now you are talking about your life, your time, your margin for error, your next decade. That is why so many people make this decision badly. Not because they are lazy, not because they are foolish. Because age 62 feels obvious, it feels available, it feels earned, it feels like the government is finally handing back something you spent 40 years paying for. So millions of people do what human beings have always done when a door opens after a long wait. They walk through it. And yet this is one of the most misunderstood financial decisions in retirement. I have watched people reduce it to slogans. Take it as early as possible, delay it as long as possible. Never leave money on the table, never trust the government. Wait for the biggest check. Grab it while you can. All of it sounds smart for about 10 seconds. Then life shows up and tears the slogan in half. The truth is harder and far more useful. The question is not whether taking Social Security at 62 is good or bad. The real question is when taking it at 62 becomes the rational move for a particular life, a particular household, a particular set of risks, a particular stretch of years that will never come back once they are gone. I want to give you a framework for that, not a slogan, not a generic answer or framework. So let me start with an image that matters more than most spreadsheets. Imagine your Social Security benefit as a faucet. Behind that faucet is a pipe you have been filling your entire working life. Every payroll tax, every year you worked, every dollar withheld before you ever got the chance to spend it. Year after year, the pressure builds inside that pipe. If you wait longer to turn the faucet on, the monthly flow becomes stronger. If you turn it on at 62, the flow is lighter. If you wait until full retirement age, it gets stronger. If you wait until 70, stronger still. That part is true, but there is another part people refuse to look at. That faucet belongs to you. And if you wait too long to turn it on, some of that water never reaches you at all. No refund, no second chance, no heir walks into the Social Security office and says, "My father waited too long, so we would like the unused years back." That is not how the system works. So when people tell you this is a simple game of waiting for the biggest number, they are already thinking too narrowly. Let's put as not large the monthly stream can become in some ideal world. The question is when the stream should begin for the actual life you are likely to live. Now we need to get practical. Let us imagine a man named Pat. Pat spent his working life doing what millions of Americans do. He worked hard, earned a respectable income, paid his taxes, and reached his early 60s with the kind of record that gives him real choices. If Pat files at 62, maybe his benefit is around $2,238 per month. If he waits until full retirement age, maybe around $3,198. If he delays all the way to 70, maybe around $3,966. At first glance, it looks obvious. Wait longer, get more. That is how the story is usually told. And if you stop there, you will think the decision is finished before it ever began, because the real comparison is never monthly check versus monthly check. The real comparison is lifetime stream versus lifetime stream. If Pat files at 62, he collects smaller checks for more years. If he waits, he collects larger checks for fewer years at some point. The totals cross. That crossing point is what people call the break-even age. Depending on the comparison, it often lands somewhere around the late 70s or early 80s. This is where sloppy thinking begins to destroy good decisions. People hear that number and assume they now know what to do. They don't T. Because break. Even math is only useful if your assumptions about life are even remotely honest. Most people talk about life expectancy like it is one fixed number carved into stone. It isn't. Life expectancy at birth is one thing. Life expectancy once you have already made it to 62 is something else entirely. If you are 62 and have made it there without major health problems, the odds are different from the odds you had the day you were born. That one detail changes everything. Maybe Pat expects to live to 84. Maybe he does not. Maybe his father died at 73 and his grandfather at 71. Maybe he has already had the warning shot. The surgery, the diagnosis, the medication he pretends is temporary. Maybe his health is excellent. His family lives forever, and he still hikes like a man who forgot the calendar exists. Do you see the point? This is not a decision about the best age in theory. It is a decision about uncertainty. A small change in assumed lifespan can completely flip the answer. Shift the timeline a few years and the financially superior move can move with it. That is why I have never trusted people who talk about claiming age as if they are handing out a universal law of nature. They are not. They are handing out a simplified answer to a question. Life never asks in a simplified way. And then there is inflation. Most people do not appreciate how quietly powerful this is. Social Security is one of the few sources of retirement income that gets adjusted over time through cost of living increases that matters a lot. And here is where waiting becomes genuinely powerful. If your starting monthly benefit is larger, then your future inflation adjustments are being applied to a larger base. A 3% increase on a small number is not the same as a 3% increase on a large number. Over time, the gap does not merely persist, it widens, then it compounds, and it becomes the kind of difference that looks trivial in 1 year in life, changing over 20. That is the best argument for waiting. And it is a serious argument, which is exactly why I dislike the cheap version of this conversation. Because the cheap version only tells you half the truth. It tells you waiting increases the monthly number, which is true. It does not tell you that the value of early years, household coordination, health reality, portfolio risk, tax timing, and simple human usefulness can all outweigh that higher later number for the right person. That is where the real decision begins. So let me walk you through the situations where filing at 62 can actually be the smarter move. The first is the one polite society likes to avoid: your health or your family history. You do not have to be dying for this to matter. You do not need a dramatic diagnosis. If the men in your family consistently did not live long, if the women in your family ran into major decline much earlier than average, if your own body has already started sending signals that you would be reckless to ignore, then your planning should reflect reality instead of wishful thinking. This is not pessimism. This is capital allocation. If a man is unlikely to live long enough for the delayed strategy to win, then delaying is not discipline. It is mispricing risk. He is sacrificing years of checks in exchange for a larger later check he may never meaningfully enjoy. That is not noble. That is poor planning wearing a respectable suit. I have always believed that intelligent investing begins by facing reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. The same principle applies here. If your likely timeline is shorter, collecting earlier can be the efficient move. You are converting an uncertain later advantage into certain earlier cash flow while you are still here to use it. The second reason is one I wish more people would admit openly. You want to use your money while your life still has range. Retirement does not arrive as one long, flat experience. It arrives in phases. There are the active years, when your curiosity still outruns your limitations. You travel, you take the long walks, you get on the plane, you help the grandchildren move, you fix the property, you say yes to effort. Then come the slower years, then come the narrower years. Now ask yourself a question that finance people often avoid because it makes their spreadsheets uncomfortable. Is $1 at 63 equal to $1 at 83? Mathematically, maybe. Humanly, not even close. I have seen too many people win the math and lose the timing. They delayed, they optimized, they got the larger number. And by the time they had the larger number, their knees, their lungs, their energy, or their spouse had rewritten the life they thought they were preserving the money for. Money is not an end in itself. Money is stored life. And when the life phase that needed the money has passed, the stored life does not have the same value. So if claiming at 62 allows you to live the years that still have mobility, appetite, strength, and reach, that is not emotional weakness. That is correct matching of resources to utility. An old man with a bigger check and a smaller life is not automatically better off than a younger retiree with a smaller check and the ability to use it where it matters most. The third reason has nothing to do with you as an isolated individual. It has to do with the household. Social Security planning is often ruined by individual thinking inside a family problem. If you are married, your decision can affect your spouse's options. In some households, especially where one spouse earned much more or one spouse spent years out of the paid workforce raising children or working part-time, the lower earner may rely heavily on spousal benefits. Those benefits do not float in from the sky on their own timetable. In many cases, your filing decision is the key that unlocks them, that changes the math, because now the question is no longer what maximizes my check. Now the question is what maximizes the total flow into this household over the years that matter most. A lot of supposedly sophisticated advice breaks down right there. The higher earner is told to delay. The advice looks elegant in isolation, but the spouse sitting 6 inches away may be stuck receiving nothing or much less, while the household waits for the idealized later payout. If filing at 62 begins a stream that helps the household now, the so-called suboptimal individual choice may be the superior household choice. That is not a technical footnote. That is the whole game. You are not managing a personal ego score. You are managing a shared economic organism. The fourth reason is even more personal. Your spouse has serious health problems. This is where the spreadsheet people often lose the plot. When one spouse has a meaningful health issue, survivor planning matters more than monthly optimization theater. Sometimes the lower earner can claim early on their own record, collect during the years both spouses are alive, and later switch to a larger survivor benefit after the higher earner dies. In that situation, waiting on the smaller personal benefit may not be wise at all. It may simply mean leaving years of usable income untouched. Timing matters here, sequence matters. The order in which benefits begin and switch matters. This is why I always tell people to stop talking about Social Security as though it were just a personal max versus min decision. In many marriages, it is really a timing bridge across a painful future that nobody wants to discuss openly. When handled correctly, that bridge can produce income when it is most needed and preserve the larger benefit later when the household has become one person instead of two. The fifth reason arrives when the stock market behaves like the stock market, which is to say badly at exactly the wrong moment. A person can retire with a sound plan and still get ambushed by timing. If the market falls hard in the first years of retirement and you are depending heavily on portfolio withdrawals, you may be forced to sell assets at terrible prices just to pay the electric bill. That is how retirement plans get broken, not because the long-term return assumption was wrong, but because you were compelled to liquidate good assets during bad conditions. This is what people call sequence risk, and one of the cleanest ways to reduce it is to establish another income stream sooner. Social Security at 62 can serve as a buffer, a floor, a piece of guaranteed cash flow that reduces how much you have to yank out of your portfolio when the market is on its back. Instead of selling depressed assets, you buy time. Sometimes buying time is the most valuable financial act available. And if you are still mentally sharp and financially disciplined, there is an additional angle. Early Social Security cash flow can preserve invested assets or allow opportunistic deployment when fear is high and prices are low. That does not mean everyone should claim early and start trading like a maniac. It means the value of a guaranteed government-backed stream during a market storm is often underestimated by people who have only modeled retirement under clean, smooth assumptions. Markets are not smooth. Retirement is not smooth. Your plan should not depend on smoothness. The sixth reason is taxes. More specifically, the years when your taxable income temporarily sits in a useful window. There is often a stretch in retirement when a person has stopped working but has not yet reached the stage where required minimum distributions are pushing more income into the tax return. Those years can be unusually attractive from a tax planning perspective in the right situation. Beginning Social Security during a lower income window can make sense, particularly if it coordinates more intelligently with withdrawals, conversions, or the timing of other income sources. The point here is not that filing early is always superior for tax reasons. The point is that timing income matters. What you keep matters more than what you are quoted. I have seen people obsess over the gross benefit while ignoring the broader tax architecture of their retirement. That is backwards. The right claiming age is never just about the biggest advertised check. It is about the after-tax usefulness of the total plan, year by year, across the period you are likely to live. Then we arrive at the seventh reason, the plainest reason: you need the money. No elegant theory, no clever framework, no superior posture. You need the money. I do not want people feeling ashamed of that. You paid into the system for decades. If life hit you harder than you expected, if work ended sooner than planned, if medical bills arrived, if family obligations expanded, if the job market decided a man in his early 60s was old enough to ignore and young enough not to help, then taking Social Security at 62 is not some moral failure of discipline. It is the system doing what it was built to do. It is a safety net functioning as a safety net. People sometimes talk as if optimal strategy is always available to everyone. It is sometimes the correct move is not the theoretically perfect move. It is the move that stabilizes the household and keeps the structure standing. If the money is needed, the money is needed. Pretending otherwise helps nobody. Let me give you a real way to see all this. Imagine a woman named Sandra. Sandra is 62, recently retired. Her husband is 65. He earned more than she did, which means his benefit is larger. He also has a serious heart condition. Sandra's own benefit at 62 might be around $2,100 a month. If she waits until full retirement age, maybe it climbs much higher on paper. Waiting looks respectable. But let us follow the actual life instead of the paper. If Sandra waits, she collects nothing from her own record during those early years while her husband is still alive. Then suppose he dies at 69, she switches to his larger survivor benefit. All those years in between, the years when she could have been collecting on her own record, are gone. But if Sandra files at 62, something different happens. She brings in her own benefit during the years both are still living. Then when he passes, she steps into the larger survivor benefit. She has created a bridge. She has captured real household income during a period that otherwise would have produced nothing from her record. That is not gaming the system. That is understanding it. Now, because I am trying to tell you the truth instead of selling you a convenient answer, let me say the other side clearly. There are absolutely situations where waiting is superior. If you are in excellent health, if longevity runs through your family like a stubborn gene that refuses to quit, if your Social Security benefit will be the core income floor of your later retirement, if your household does not need the early years of cash flow, if your spouse also has a strong record, If your investment portfolio is not exposed to serious sequence stress, then delaying can be extremely valuable. A larger inflation-adjusted lifetime check is no small thing. For many people, especially those likely to live a long time, the later larger benefit acts like a remarkably attractive form of longevity insurance. So do not twist what I am saying. I am not telling you 62 is the new universal answer. I am telling you universal answers are for people who do not understand the problem. This decision lives at the intersection of health, lifespan, household structure, markets, taxes, need, and usefulness. Remove any one of those and you can still build a simplistic recommendation. Keep them all in view and the honest answer becomes more demanding and more helpful. That is why I want to leave you with 3 governing ideas. First, run the numbers under multiple lifespans, not one fantasy lifespan. Change the horizon a few years in each direction and watch what happens. If the best answer flips with a small change, then what you have is not certainty. What you have is sensitivity. That should humble you and sharpen you at the same time. Second, think like a household spousal. Benefits, survivor benefits, timing coordination, shared expenses, shared risk, shared reality. A strategy that looks brilliant for one person can be mediocre for the family. That is not brilliance, that is tunnel vision. Third, stay flexible. Health changes, markets change. Work changes, needs change. Plans should be revised when reality changes. Stubbornness is not discipline. Discipline is adjusting intelligently while the facts are still in motion. Years ago, I learned that most large financial errors are not caused by low intelligence. They are caused by oversimplification. People grab the first clean answer that makes them feel decisive. Then they cling to it long after reality has changed. Social Security claiming decisions are full of that danger. The simple answer is seductive. It lets you stop thinking. Unfortunately, it can also let you stop thinking too soon. You do not need a slogan here. You need clarity. You need honesty. You need a view of your own life that is not distorted by other people's averages, other people's marriages, other people's health records, or other people's fear. Sometimes taking Social Security at 62 is short-sighted. Sometimes it is prudent. Sometimes it is the move that gives you more lifetime utility, more household flexibility, more portfolio resilience, and more real-world peace. The mistake is not claiming at 62. The mistake is treating the decision as though it belongs to a formula more than it belongs to your life. The Social Security office can tell you what the monthly amounts are. A calculator can estimate a crossover age. An advisor can run a projection, but none of them can tell you what your real priorities are. How much your spouse depends on the timing, what your health history is whispering, how much usefulness lives in the next few years, or whether the larger later check is truly more valuable than the earlier smaller one in the life you are actually living. That part is your work. Do that work honestly, and you will not need a canned answer. You will have your answer. And if that answer is 62, it does not mean you failed the test. It may mean you finally understood what the test really was,